Well, I'm sitting in the SAS terminal at JFK International Airport, and I have a few things running through my mind. I met a very interesting chap on the TWA flight from Chicago to New York. This boy's name was John, and he is in the Air Force Station on Long Island. And I got into a very interesting discussion with him, which dealt essentially about identity formation and how a young man finds himself. He is hoping someday to go into the construction business on a small enough scale that would permit him to be the owner of such a business. It seemed to me that he had his feet on the ground, and he and I discussed some of the ways in which we solved our social problems in the complex structure in which we live. He was stationed in Alaska, somewhere near Anchorage, for a year, and as I'm sitting here now in this lobby, waiting for my plane to depart, which will be in about another hour and a half, I thought to myself how strange it is how we touch people's lives just for a minute, and yet what lasting impressions that can have if you really have something to talk about. He said that of all the people he had met on airplanes, I was the second one who ever really struck up a good conversation with him. The other person was a Catholic priest. So that made me feel good because of my desire to have essential communication with people. So far, so good. Making my connections and getting checked in all right and so forth and so on. I used to sit at the coffee table and listen to my colleagues talk about at work and various places how you would wait in an airport and spend more time waiting to take off and landing than you do in the actual flight, and now it's actually something I've experienced. The flight from Chicago to New York was very smooth, very nice, but it took us about 40 minutes to get off the ground after I got in the plane, maybe even longer, maybe up to an hour. And then when we got at Kennedy, it took another 45 minutes or so after we got on the ground to get out. Plus, we circled around New York for about, well, it seemed to me like an hour before we got clearance to land. So I can laugh with those now who joke about such things. They're very systematic here at SAS. They assign you a seat and they load the plane by rows. The lady at the desk calls out this information. Very interesting.
Flight 918 to Bergen and Copenhagen is now ready for boarding at gate
So here goes. Sounds of Sutton am I. By the Viking ship. I'm back in the Hotel Norge, where I had got a little rest. We lost 5 hours of sleep on that plane ride, let alone the disturbances. It was very different to eat a delightful supper with a shrimp cocktail and steak. Oh, say about maybe 10 o'clock or 10:30 at night time, and then about 5 hours later to be eating breakfast on the plane. And I suppose this would happen to almost anyone, but it sure upset my balance and perspective of time. And I got here on Sutnamai so bewildered and in a sense tired that I just kind of stammered around the streets, and my brain wasn't working. And finally I said I couldn't find the man who is supposed to help me with my room, because nobody's home on this day. Everybody's out in the street. And when they say everybody, they mean everybody. Nobody's home. So I finally came to my senses, and I checked into the hotel, and I took a nap like I've never taken. And then I just got up from the nap and went out to see how late the airline's place would be open so I can get my baggage. I thought they might close at 3 in the afternoon or something like that, but as it turns out, they're open till 11:30 tonight. One of the few places that is open. It's a mystery to me. I don't understand it. At any rate, I got this an hour sleep, and I went out, and it feels, oh gee, just so invigorating. I got here on one of the warmest days. It was 57 degrees when we pulled into Bergen this morning, about 10 o'clock. And it's cooled off some now, but the sun is still out. It goes behind clouds once in a while, but boy, it sure makes this place look quaint. And it's the kind of, the temperature may be right about 50 now, and you would say it's brisk, bracing climb, bracing feeling. For a person who's tired like myself, it lifts your spirits up, especially with all the people mulling around with their stickers and so forth. And so I met the nice Norwegian man at a hot dog stand, and he was in the service, and he came to Chicago in 1943 on a Norwegian destroyer, and he talked with me for a few minutes, and then I went over and bought my my ribbon, because I felt like I was out of it without some red, white, and blue on me, and this will let me travel a little less conspicuously, perhaps. So now I'm going to go out and see if I can capture some sounds, some more sounds and sights of this, they call it Holy Day even over here. I think I might be able to pick up a band or two. It's a Norwegian rock and roll group playing out of the Viking ship. Oh, hold on, here we go again. 18 May, Saturday. Some reflections. I met Mr. Sea fish that I have not seen before, including schools of herring, various types of crab and lobster, and one display of shrimp, as they actually are in the bottom of the ocean, alive. But I took a very lovely walk out into this peninsula in the Bay of Bergen and enjoyed a very beautiful park, a strolling park with benches periodically arranged in various cubby holes and on various ledges so that they were actually quite inconspicuous. Yes, I met the manager of the Norwegian Opera, and I had a mittag with him. Ulfeng Berne, stage manager in chief, der Norska Opera. And so I am making contacts. One picture I took today of a kind of a tugboat going around the bay intrigued me because the speed of the internal combustion engine was so slow. The big piston, whatever was moving that boat along at a very nice speed, was only going about peck, 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 peck. And I thought, boy, that boat is really moving for a piston that's firing that slowly. So I took a picture of that, and we'll all enjoy that together. I bought some fruit and Norwegian orange pop of some kind called Solo, and it's bottled in Bergen. And I've already enjoyed several bottles of Bergen beer. But the best beer I tasted so far was on the plane, and it was a Ringnes beer. I think it's made in Oslo, but I daren't say that too loud in this town. But all of the beer is good. You can taste that it's made with a clear water of some kind. It all tastes like Michelob to me, at least. Maybe even better. I've been looking in the store windows and getting ideas of what things I should bring home before I spend my money. The stage manager for the orchestra, who prefers to be called Eddie, gave me a folder of the music. So I get a chance to look at a little of it tonight, which I will do. The noise of the city can be heard this Sunday morning. And if you really listen, you can hear the church bells. Perhaps I can get this better later. But this is my first Sunday morning in Bergen. A better day you couldn't find anywhere. It must be about 65 degrees, which feels probably like 75 at home. Right now I'm watching a cable car coming down the mountain, and I'm outside of my hotel room. And I think that now is as good a time as any to take a picture so that you see a little bit of what I saw when I made this this tape message. I can see there is still some snow on the mountains. Some people told me that when I came over there wouldn't be any, but there is still some left. And that's just nice to see. Everything is so picturesque. It is so different for me. The church bells must be ringing. My clock is a little bit off. I think it must be 10:30 in the morning. My clock says 11:15. It's a tourist bus going down the street. Now you can hear the church bells well. I just stepped inside my room, and I think that I should tell about last night before I forget it. I saw a very interesting scene my first Saturday night down in the fish market. Now the fish market closes up sometime in the afternoon, I'm not sure which, and they clean that place up immaculately, which reminds me of another story in parenthesis. After Sutnamai, that place was a mess with all kinds of wrappers and broken bottles and the normal debris of any festive crowd. I mean, I wouldn't say piggy, but I would say certainly, a healthy amount of debris. By the next morning, that place was scrubbed up, and you couldn't tell there was a festival there last night. And I don't know when they cleaned it up. Must have been in the early hours of the morning, but just as though the elves or something had been there. Now, back to the other story. The same thing is true at the fish market. In the morning, all the flowers are there, and the umbrellas, and the men, and the fish, and the smell. But when they clean that thing up by 5 or 6 at night, you couldn't tell that any of that was there in the morning. Of course, the boats are in the harbor. So, at any rate, here was a Salvation Army group holding a meeting about 9 o'clock. And I decided to stand there and contribute support by being a spectator, hoping that in my small way I would influence the numbers. Well, owing to the fact that this is a high holiday, a certain amount of people, including younger boys, are given to, you'd say, inebriation. And so there were hecklers there for the Salvation Army. And it was a little bit depressing for me for a while because I don't know how seriously to take it. I see things that I don't like, a certain amount of that, beatnikish thing from England, the young mod crowd. And I don't understand them, but maybe they're necessary. At any rate, they don't seem to bother anybody except they walk around with that tough young look and you don't know whether they're about to attack you or whether they're just normal growing pains, Someone must straighten me out on that someday. At any rate, there was a scuffle off to the side, and in a minute or two, the police were there, and they took about 4 young boys off. I saw that, and then there were drunks that were heckling these Salvation Army people. And so I thought, what is this? But then I was assured by one Norwegian gentleman that this is the exception and that it is related to the festive weekend. There was one young boy, and I imagine he was only 18 years old, and he was drinking let's see, what is that Jamaican? Rum. He was drinking rum straight from the bottle, and these guys were passing it around, and they were drunk already. It's interesting. The scene was simply a group of people standing up for a cause, trying to build something, and then these young people out just to have a good time were trying to interfere, you might say.